Greater Phoenix. We can tell our story differently. A new perspective. A different look. Greater Phoenix A to Z.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where this finds you. Welcome to the Greater Phoenix A to Z podcast. I'm your host, Casey Gilchrist, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Tim Bourcet. Welcome.
Hello, everybody.
Tim and I will be bringing you episodes throughout the year, alternating as your hosts and occasionally joining one another like we are today. And this is a very, very special episode because it is our first episode. So exciting. Oh, I get to play with all these buttons, guys. We have a lot in store. But on this podcast, we'll be breaking misconceptions about Greater Phoenix, talking with experts from around the market on a wide array of subjects and topics, sharing what makes our region so very special, and bringing you the latest Greater Phoenix news. And today, on our first episode, we could think of no one else to grace our presence than our legendary CEO, Mr. Chris Camacho. Welcome.
Well, thank you. You probably didn't have a choice. Probably wasn't your first choice, but here we are.
I think you were our top choice amongst the group here. But to kick it off and to get our listeners a little bit more acquainted with Tim and I, we figured we could play a fun game of Two Truths and a Lie where we quiz Chris on ourselves. And I'm newer to Phoenix, so Chris doesn't know me too well. So I might stump him, but he might know Tim.
Unfortunately, Chris knows about a lot of my life events.
Your skeletons in the closet? Oh, man.
There's so many. There are so many.
So many. All right, Chris. So my two truths and a lie. You have to guess the lie. I've been skydiving. I was vegan for 2 years. And I've never been to a college football game.
I'm guessing that you've never been a vegan.
I believe she was a vegan for 2 years, Chris.
I was a vegan, but it was for 1 year. I only lasted a year.
Still pretty impressive.
It was the worst time of my life, actually. The fact that I could not eat meat. I don't know how I did it, but I learned I have a soy allergy during that time of sacrifice. But yeah, vegan for 1 year. So that is the lie. So you did get it right. So I'm going to pass it over to Tim.
I believe Chris might know one or two of these, but just in case. Two truths and a lie. One, I can juggle clubs or pins, as many of you know them. My grandfather was a bodyguard for the Three Stooges, and my mom and dad met while in the Peace Corps together.
Okay, it's definitely not number one. I know I believe you're a juggler.
You can juggle?
I can juggle clubs and unicycle.
At the same time?
I can.
He was in the traveling circus previously.
What?
He's kidding, but I would have done that in a heartbeat.
All right, so Peace Corps, and remind me of the middle one.
My grandfather was a bodyguard for the Three Stooges, and my parents met while serving together in the Peace Corps.
I'm going to say the lie is your parents met in the Peace Corps.
Very good, Mr. Camacho. They did not.
2 for 2.
Yeah, and my grandfather was a bodyguard in New York in the 50s and 60s. Jerry Lewis, the Three Stooges, a bunch of folks from that time. So look at you.
Wow, starting off on a good spot here.
I know, and I have a factoid that I've learned about you, Chris, and I need to know if it's true or false. And that is, I've heard that you are a major HOV lane violator. Is that true? Or false?
Define major.
Major? Like
rite of passage. It's, we have busy schedules. We're very efficient in getting place to place. So I don't know if anybody from CPS is out there today, but let's hope not. Or DPS, I guess, here in Arizona.
Chris, I'm sure that didn't go into why you would buy an electric vehicle because you want to support this thriving ecosystem here in Phoenix. However, I'm guessing it didn't hurt that you can drive in an HOV lane at any time with the designated electric vehicle.
So my wife and I did buy an electric vehicle a couple years ago, and she drives it. So I just kind of mentally transpose myself into her mindset and drive in the carpool lane, trying to get where I need to go.
When Casey was bringing this topic up, I shared with her from a couple of years ago, you might remember, there was a Greater Phoenix resident who would put on a monkey mask and drive down the HOV lane, and I believe I think he racked up like 30 violations. It was not Chris Camacho, for all of our listeners. Yeah. Chris was not the monkey face wearer HOV violator. However, we have heard you love the HOV lane all hours of the day.
I don't have any further comments on that. We'll move on to the next subject.
Let me know if you see a guy in an Infinity, right? You drive an Infinity on the highway violating the HOV, please report him.
You know, what's interesting is the hypocrisy of the way I think about this is I get really frustrated when I'm driving with my kids or my wife and somebody's in the carpool lanes with a single shooter driver.
That's me.
I get really frustrated.
Yes.
So the hypocrisy of that thinking. So I'm going to try to abide by the laws of Arizona, and you'll see me in the standard lanes going forward.
Awesome. I'm happy that we're making that change, Chris. It's a step in the right direction. All right, so let's jump into the meat and potatoes about the podcast. I think for this first episode, we really just want to dive deep into our market and our metro and really talk about the change that's happened over the last 10 to 20 years. So, Chris, I guess a first question is, why are people coming to Greater Phoenix? And I know I'm new, so I probably have an interesting perspective about this as well. But from your perspective, why is anyone choosing to live here?
Sure. Well, I'd love your perspective too, being here for a year or so, and we've seen the market dramatically shift, and I think part of that is building world-class communities with world-class livability attributes, amenities. Culturally, we're very diverse, and so it's a very welcoming place for new people. So the people side, I think, is pretty simple. It's pretty affordable. We've seen people move from across the country here because of the land of opportunity mindset that does exist. And on the corporate side, arguably for the last 15 years, we've created an incredible environment for new businesses in terms of policy, both tax and regulatory, advantageous market. But we're building and investing in modern infrastructure that makes it easy for people to drive in HOV lanes or other lanes that they so choose. And we're also, building these communities with employment in mind. And so you have a balance of, building out these kind of cities with a lack of congestion, walkability. We're instituting more light rail across the valley, and it's just, we've unlocked, I think, what the next generation of cities or regions need to be built upon. Mm-hmm. And I had a group in from Taiwan yesterday, and they couldn't believe the cleanliness of the community, how safe it feels in our downtown core. And really just the immense growth that we've experienced. It's a very modern feeling place. So those are all reasons why I think people have decided to move here.
Yeah, I would echo that. I moved here for a job opportunity and wanted to venture out west and see how y'all do it out here. And I've loved it ever since. I agree with all the comments that, the group that we had in yesterday said. It's very safe. It's very clean for the fifth largest city of Phoenix being the fifth largest city in the United States. You don't feel that way, especially if you compare us to, Philly or Houston. It feels a lot more congested. So
there is something too, remember the Will Smith song, Tim, Wild Wild West?
Yes.
I do think about...
Great music video, by the way, too.
Deep pull there, Chris.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, there is this adage or this kind of humility that we have, but we're also proud of being a bit maverick and a bit, cavalier about, we're prideful of wanting to build our own community, not replicating some other place. And those of us that aren't from here, which is, I think, 60-something% of the adult population, we've decided to come here and kind of make this place our own. And I tell other people that live in other more harsh climates or, communities that they're not exactly happy with, you can make whatever you want out of this community. And I think that's a true testament of the mindset that exists here.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I've made more friends in Arizona in a year than I made in Virginia in my entire 30 years of living there. So very happy to be a part of this community and help build it even as a newbie now. And from what I understand about the region, 20, 30 years ago, there used to be pockets of cities. So it was very spread out, not so much connected. And over the last 20 to 30 years, we've really melded together. But there are still blank spots, throughout our region that are poised for future development. Where do you think that fill is going to go? Where do you see those blank spots?
Well, a lot of that's going to be dictated by where the privately deeded land is. And, we're surrounded by federal land to the north. We have a tremendous amount of state land in our education trust. And a lot of the privately deeded land is going to be out in the west side, out in Buckeye. I talked to Mr. Barney today, and he has 10,000 acres with a few partners in the southern portion of Goodyear, south of the South Mountains. And I'm just trying to fathom, even 10 years ago, I don't think I would have even voiced that could have been a corridor of the future. That's probably over the next decade to 2 decades going to be developed. In addition to that, if you go around the Horn to Southeast Valley and Queen Creek and Southeast Mesa, tremendous levels of growth there. We talked to Chip out in Apache Junction yesterday, Tim, if you recall that. And
Be Mayor Wilson of Apache Junction for our listeners.
That's right. And AJ is going to have several thousand acres of development of state land. So, I mean, you kind of go around the valley and there's really no limitation. Unlike other places that you might have sprawl, but you don't have the ability to build at the scale we do. Mm-hmm. And TSMC, which we spent time with Mark Liu, the CEO there, this week, along with President Biden, and walking through that process. I mean, you have tens of thousands of acres now that are going to be unlocked in the North Valley and the Northwest Valley and Surprise and Peoria. So I can't really pinpoint one place where this is going to happen. It's going to happen really, I think, over the next 30 to 40 years across the entire valley.
And Casey, since you are the newest person in the room, Buckeye around 2000 used to be a very quiet, literally tumbleweeds going across the road town of about 7,500. They're now just north of 100,000. And I believe projections are north of 300,000 over the next couple of decades. So that's a good indication of where some of this growth is occurring.
Yeah. And from what I understand, even down in Casa Grande, with the major home developments, it's not just commercial development, it's multifamily, it's single family homes. And is there a peak to growth in your mind? Is there a place or a threshold that you would say, okay, we don't want to become LA. We don't want to become New York or the Bay Area?
I think a lot of that really stems from the limitation of growth is really predicated on balanced investments in education and transportation infrastructure. You don't want to overburden a market with underinvested in infrastructure. That's what's led to the peril of many of these other markets. But I do think Arizona and its water planning, its the way that we've built out our cities, our connective tissue with our transportation road networks, we have ample room to grow. And here at GPEC, at Greater Phoenix Economic Council, our focus is building a world-class economy by bringing educated people to the market and growing education in the market such that we can meet the jobs of tomorrow demands. And so again, as long as we keep investing in the right ways in infrastructure, again, water and roads, education, we're going to be in a great spot for the years to come.
Awesome. I have a fun question. Are we ready for a fun question?
Let's do it.
All right. It's called Too Much or Too Little. Are you ready? It's going to be hot fire questions. Too much or too little golf courses?
Oh, I love golf.
I know, but do we have too many?
I think we're just about right.
Just
honestly.
right? That's not an option.
I think we have too many great golf courses right now.
Okay.
Exceptional location for golf. Yeah, I think we're in a good spot there.
What are your thoughts, Tim?
I have had my history on golf courses as a non-golfer is probably a little more convoluted than Chris's. However, I'm very excited because one golf course in particular is getting a sports book in the next year, and DraftKings will be putting that on near the TPC golf course. So as a resident, as a native, as somebody who obviously fully supports golf now, I'm going to have to physically go there, stimulate the economy, check out the surroundings. So things like that keep happening. Who am I to judge?
Fair.
2024, that's around the corner with DraftKings opening up, right? All right, I'll do better than this next one, I promise.
All right, I'll take this one. So let's go. Let's keep it light. Too much, too little. Fast food restaurants. Now, I'm going to give a caveat. Taking out any Filibertos, Los Betos, any of the Toes system, because you can never have too much of that.
Never too many.
Obviously.
Yes.
So focusing fast food. Too much, too little.
I think too much. I like the local shops, the locally owned restaurants, and that's really been activated here in the last 15 years. I remember when I first came here almost 20 years ago, it definitely felt like a big box, big retail market, and unequivocally that has shifted to a much more homegrown set of restaurants, coffee shops, you name it. So I'd say too much.
But in a rush, you could still get a carne asada burrito from a Filiberto's if you need to.
No question.
At 2 a.m. if you need to. Too much or too little? This one might be controversial. Sam Fox.
Well, you can never have too much Sam Fox.
I know. I do want a Henry closer to me.
His restaurants are exceptional. And if you haven't seen what he's doing at the Grove with his partners there, right along Camelback, that restaurant, I was perched up at JLL the other day. These guys got life figured out. They're playing pickleball up on the rooftop, and then you look north and you have this new Sam Fox Hotel and Restaurant. Camelback just to the northeast. I mean, it is one of the most iconic locations now in the valley. So, and for any listeners who have been to Nashville, there's another Sam Fox. Probably a year ago, they released a new location there, and it's one of the most fun places I've been across the country. So, I think it's a partnership with Justin Timberlake as well. So, pretty neat.
Very cool.
For you Justin Timberlake fans.
Yeah.
I'm going to go off of the golf one more time. Something that I think is near and dear to your heart. Too much, too little. Top golf locations.
I too much. I like Top Golf when I'm taking my kids and family, but you know what's funny is when I go hit balls there, it screws up my golf game hitting off those pads. And so I'm like Sergio Garcia. I like to dig. You know, I'm one of those that I'm a greenskeeper's nightmare. But yeah, I mean they're great. They produce actually a lot of revenue for our cities. I think the Glendale and Scottsdale locations are some of the highest revenue yielding producers in the country. Oh, wow. Those two locations, but. Yeah, maybe just friends and family and fun, but yeah.
For our listeners, if you do not know, Chris Camacho is a bit competitive.
Just a little bit.
Just a bit. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Find him out on the golf course or Top Golf. Last one, too much or too little distribution projects.
Well, I'd say we're in a location. I'd say too much in that we're in a location where we have to service the Southwest market, the entire the southwestern U.S. I guess you can never have too many distribution projects, but what I want to see is a balance of e-commerce and distros happening across the valley, but also manufacturing. So, the difference between distribution projects that need to service the consumer markets in the Southwest versus a manufacturer that produces a product that produces exports, where we export goods and create wealth for our community. That leads to not only higher wage jobs, but it leads to a more diversified economic base. So in addition, distribution centers historically kind of ebb and flow with the health of the economy, and more significantly than, say, manufacturing. So again, for all my distributions fans out there that want to see more product, more the sexy cross-stock flex distribution, I'm not a naysayer on those, but we do have a lot of that kind of product coming out of the ground. So I'd also like to balance that with more manufacturing and export-oriented activity.
Fair. I agree 100%. All right. Shifting things a little bit from, the shift in geographics and things of that nature in our market, and shifting it to culture. From my perspective, and perhaps people who are thinking about moving to Phoenix or are new to Phoenix, how has the quality of life, I guess you could say, in Phoenix shifted over the last 20 years from, we have 5 major sports teams. That hasn't always been the case. What new amenities, if you will, are in Phoenix that weren't here 20 years ago?
Did you get here 14 years ago, correct, Chris?
I moved to Arizona in 2004, so almost 19.
Wow.
Okay, so you're close to the 20-year mark then.
Mm-hmm.
Veteran.
Well, I think number one, just the following of our sports base, our sporting team base, our mega events we host here are now an identity of who we are. So I think of Cactus League. I was out with some Charos yesterday that oversee spring training. What an economic impact benefit that spring training facilities have in our community, to Waste Management Phoenix Open. And there's certainly a golf following for those of you that haven't been out to the Open. I don't know who you are if you live here in Phoenix, but I will tell you that's become a bucket list for not just your party crowd, but your golf fans and your business leaders around the world. I mean, I get asked about that as much as I get asked about water in Arizona. Mm-hmm. So I think sports have definitely laid a foundation for what makes this market unique. We're hosting a Super Bowl right around the corner too, so I can only fathom that week in February what this place is going to be like. It'll be under global spotlight for sure. I'd also say too, a lot of the urban kind of cultural amenities that have evolved in this community, the arts and culture scene. I look at the symphony, the ballet, Gamage, what we've done in terms of creating. We're already the 5th largest city, Casey, as you referenced, but the amenity base that should follow a 5th largest city, I think, has evolved as well. So I look at the MEM, the Music Instrument Museum, to a lot of the Native American investments that have been made in this community. That's truly a reflection of who we are as a people, and I love the fact that you can do so many different things here. I'm still learning from our younger team members about all of these hidden awesome bars that speakeasies that are even downtown, like right around here that I didn't even know about. So I'm trying to become cool again, and I'll find my pathway back to being cool, but not banking on it. But I think that's what really makes this place unique.
Chris, you hit on something earlier talking about communities developing their own identity, not necessarily copying. And I know one thing as a native and now being at GPEC for 8 years that I've seen, Phoenix, Gilbert, Peoria, all of these cities, vastly different in their location, sizes, and whatnot, but developing their own kind of downtown cultures. That's been a conversation in our line of work for the last few years, kind of the work, live, play atmosphere. And I look at these cities that did not have that, heck, 10 years, let alone 20 years ago. But again, Gilbert, I think, being a good example of that. They have created their own district that's just booming right now. So, I guess you've actually been part of those conversations. And so are there any other spots that you would say you would like to highlight? Because again, I think of, kind of Peoria, Glendale doing their own downtown, Gilbert, Phoenix kind of led the way. A lot of people forget Phoenix never really had a downtown until about 15 years ago. They tried numerous times over decades and nothing ever stuck. And now we are recording this in the heart of downtown. You got Van Buren, Roosevelt Row, Crescent Ballroom, all these places that are putting on shows every night to kind of pair with what you were talking about, more of the sophisticated, the symphonies and the museums, whereas I'm hanging out in those dive-ear music venues.
Concert at the Van Buren.
Well, what I would say to that is you mentioned so many of these suburban area downtowns, the heritage area in Gilbert, for example, Glendale and what they've done with their downtown, and even around Westgate as well. One thing that I often get asked by either national media or corporations is, how have you, the collective market, had so much success? And I say, well, I think in large part it's city leadership with visions to create new destinations. Not only they're going to drive tax base, but really create sense of place for their residents. And when new people come to town, I think that's the reaction. Is it's not just downtown Phoenix, which I would argue if we didn't have Proposition 301 back in early 2000s, you wouldn't have ASU downtown, which then triggered the biomedical campus, which over at Brad Van Alek's house last night, we celebrated the CAMI facility, which is a new U of A major innovation center that's going to be built on the biomedical campus. So again, it's both urban and suburban central business districts, downtowns that have made this market unique. It's a set of assets as opposed to a singular location where all of the jobs or all of the amenity bases. It's really spread out throughout the entire valley, including Scottsdale and far Southwest Valley. So it's pretty neat to see that all these cities are really unique.
So we've talked about this growth. Obviously, we've seen it in the news for years. Coming from not only out of state but internationally. Now, not getting into partisan politics, but because we talk about this so much on a daily basis, do you believe this migration into the state is shifting some of the political landscape? Again, not necessarily party affiliation or anything like that, but we've seen it from school board races to legislative races to overall. Do you think that migration is having that shift on the political, landscape?
Well, I think it's hard not to recognize that the accessibility of information or even disinformation, social media, and access there is driving more tribalism. It's pushing people away from the middle and pragmatism in balance. It's pushing people into the corners. The unfortunate aspect of that is it leads to more visceral debates instead of civil discourse. And so what I would hope going forward is that we as Arizonans, whether you're brand new from California or Chicago or Canada, wherever you're from, this is now home. And that we work pragmatically to address the needs of our community, whether that's water planning or cheering for the Suns. It shouldn't matter. That we're all Arizonans and that we work together on challenges and opportunities ahead. And so, again, I think every growth market is grappling with these similar issues, whether you're Atlanta, Austin, Texas. We were in Charlotte with Casey and I was that 2 weeks ago now? Mm-hmm. You can see these growth markets are all kind of grappling with the same challenge of identity. You have all these new people. You have, in Arizona, I meet a homesteading family that feels like every other week, someone that's been here 5-6 generations. And that confluence of new and old it's truly a nexus that we have to work on together. And so I hope we kind of embrace this spirit of individualism, where we like to be unique. We don't want to be anybody else, but yet, we know what we want as Arizonans. And I just hope that politics doesn't kind of usurp the balance or interest of our communities. And, I think we're going to come out of this over the next several years. I do think the political shift nationally that I do believe we'll undertake in the next 5 years will bring some normalcy back, some centrism back. And even with the announcement today with Kirsten Sinema, becoming an independent, if that's not a major statement, for her and what she believes Arizona's future is to become. So there's a lot there, but again, I think we're unique. Arizona's truly unique in the spirit of individualism, and I hope we embrace that.
Absolutely. I'd like to finish this segment up by asking Casey a question. We're going to have a little fun here. Casey, as the newest resident to Arizona here in this room, what is an Arizona misconception you are ashamed to admit is true?
Maybe not ashamed to admit, but terrified to admit is true, is that there are rattlesnakes on the golf course. I know we've talked a lot about golf, but I went out with a group of folks to the JW golf resort, and I was driving in my cart and just moseying all along. And I've played golf in Virginia. I was active on the course out there. And all of a sudden I get this message on the little screen saying, beware, you're in a rattlesnake zone. And I was like, excuse me, sir, like this is new. I'm not used to it. I'm like, we're not going to really see a rattlesnake. And I was golfing with somebody and they were like, actually, there is one right over there. Do not aim in that direction. And I did not look. Snakes are my biggest fear. So
now the good news is they come in with a natural defense mechanism. So as long as you stay away from them, you're probably fine.
I don't want to see them while I'm playing golf. There's in Virginia, you had to be aware of Canadian geese or mosquitoes. And here I will take Canadian geese or mosquitoes over rattlesnakes any day of the week. But that's been my biggest Arizona misconception that I'm ashamed to admit is true.
Have you had a run-in with a coyote on the golf course?
Not yet.
So they're very commonplace too. So I remember the first time I was playing up in it's either Troon or Greyhawk or somewhere up north, and again, coming from the Midwest, you just don't expect to be in the fairway and in your backswing seeing a coyote out of the corner of your eye.
Oh God!
If ever we saw a coyote, you'd run, right?
Yes.
And the people I were with just stood there calmly and are like, "We'll just wait till they pass, and then we'll play through." It's like, so that's what Arizona has to offer.
Great. Pretty much I might be switching sports is what I'm saying.
Chris, we're going to come to you because I want to hear your misconception, but I'm going to step up here again as the native in the room. A misconception, which is correct, is that our drivers are terrible.
They are.
However, I would like to point out it's y'all who move here and make the driving worse. Me as a native, a perfect driving record.
No, I will say when I pulled up from Richmond, Virginia, my first day, and I had to go on Camelback Road, and there's this thing called a suicide lane. Didn't know how to operate in the suicide lane, so I'm like, and at certain times you're not allowed to be in the suicide lane, go in a certain direction. I was there getting honked at. I'm like, you guys are so mean, and it's really my fault.
I was probably because I live on 7th Ave, so it was probably me behind you. Yeah. Honking and telling you.
Because I live off 7th, too.
So, Chris, you're a Midwestern boy, but you're here in Arizona now. What do you think is a misconception that you would admit is actually true here in Arizona?
I'm going to lay out the softball or layup here, which is it's a dry heat. So when I first came here, I remember thinking, okay, 104, 105, if it ever got that warm in the Midwest with humidity, I mean, that would be near death. You'd be almost peril there. Well, you hit 107 here. That's my breaking point where it's like, okay, I don't care if it's 0% humidity. 107 is pretty warm. And then there was one year we hit, I think it was 118, maybe 119. And I mean, you do feel the oven effect when that does happen. But again, as you spend time in Chicago or Toronto or virtually anywhere else in the country, I can't stand humidity. 2, I can't stand bugs and mosquitoes. So you don't have any of that out here. But the dry heat, I mean, when your skin starts flaking because it's so hot and you drink water but you don't sweat, that's another. We'll go back to golf. If you ever try to play golf in the summer without a headache, it's pretty amazing just because it does get warm. So again, that's something that you can't overcome necessarily, but you learn to live with it and know when to pick your spots.
I can co-sign on that. When I was stationed out in Biloxi, I had never experienced humidity. I moved there in August and I truly experienced it. And that made me want to move back to Arizona. And that's why I'm here. But yes, I like your point. The 107 is 105, 107 is generally the limit of, oh, this isn't too bad too. Maybe not.
Yeah, definitely plan your vacations if you're planning on moving to Arizona during the summertime, just to escape the heat. All right, now moving on to kind of our next topic is the change in economics. So Arizona in general was known for the 5 C's. And as a newbie to Arizona, I had no idea what you guys were talking about when you said that. And for those listeners who do not know, the 5 C's stand for cotton, citrus, climate, cattle, and copper. And that really made up Arizona's economy in the early years of its founding. And now we're shifting to this more advanced economy. And can you, Chris, kind of give your insights into what prompted that change and what you're hoping to see in the future?
Well, certainly this was an agrarian economy in the early 1900s. And you said you want to liven this up by talking about the economy. So I'm going to do my best here. But, shifting from early 1900s where, small population, very ag dominant, to the 1950s, post the Second World War, and you started to see a lot of aerospace and defense and microelectronics in the 70s. And what that manifested to over time was you built a critical mass of people, a population base, started to see a beginning stages of diversity of industry, but you also had a lot of construction and tourism growth during that era as well. And we had those boom and bust cycles. Those of you that were here in the 91 savings and loan crisis to the tech bust in the late 1990s into early 2000s, you had September 11th. So we've had these fits and starts in terms of this economy, and then we hit 2008. I think 2008 was a defining moment for a lot of industry leaders and policymakers to say, look, we have to stop this boom and bust, this hypercycles. And so a lot of the policies that were put in place were really intended to drive the transformational experience we've had today. So whether that's regulatory policies, tax policies that made us more competitive, it was strategic investments in innovation, investments in education and infrastructure. So where we stand today, we're one of the most envied markets in the country because the job growth that's occurred here in the last decade is much more quality, so higher wages, more innovation-intensive industries have evolved here. But in addition to that, I use like healthcare as an example. Healthcare historically was really growing because patient care growth was in place. We had more people, you needed more healthcare delivery services. That's really not only shifted in that regard, but now we're seeing more clinical trials. We're seeing more specialty care. We're exporting more of our healthcare because we're a destination location for medicine. So again, we're evolving to this very dynamic innovation and export-centered economy, and we're bringing young people from across the country here. I'd say one final thing that kind of jumps out in my mind is when I first got here, Tim knows I'm a data junkie, and I remember looking at the types of people that moved to Arizona back in the early 2000s. It was predominantly fixed income retirees that wanted to move from higher cost places. They wanted to see sunshine, and they would come to our community, and it kind of it fit our stereotype of being a place where people came to retire. What's shifted, however, if you look at the last year's shift of the 85,000 people that have moved here, majority are working age individuals, kind of that 16 to 44-year-old that are moving here to actually add value to the economy. So you add these two together, we're going to keep growing, but we're also going to keep getting younger. And that's a very different position than this market economy's ever been in.
So that's a good segue. You're talking about future development now. And so for future leaders in economic development, whether they be EDO leaders like yourselves, mayors, et cetera, what do you hope they prioritize for our region as we look over the next 20 years?
Well, you can't think about our future without heavily investing in water conservation strategies, certainly augmentation strategies, how we're going to bring more water to the state of Arizona to address our growth. But we're in a heck of a position because of the forefathers and others that have been here before us since the 1980 Water Management Plan, maybe even before that, the Central Arizona Project. So we've been at water planning. My hope is that we can continue down that path to exponentially plan well for water in our future. But one other topic that often gets overlooked but is tied to water in a way is the energy grid, making sure that we don't have rolling brownouts or blackouts like what you see in California, or God forbid what Dallas and Austin experienced a few years ago. When the grid went down, the market went down. And so as we keep adding more residents and more of these advanced industry investments, we need to make sure the energy grid is strong. But I'd say a third and fourth here, Tim, quickly would be making sure that we're heavily investing in STEM education and, alternative forms of education, the P through 20 systems, that we're building more pipelines of people, and not only for the employment side, which we obviously care about bringing new business, but also society. We want to make sure that more people can advance across the prosperity paradigm by ensuring that they have the requisite education and tools and skills to meet the needs of tomorrow's job market. And then lastly is just broad-based infrastructure. I think, Casey, you mentioned it. The one thing I want to safeguard our market against is becoming the sprawled LA market where you can't get, to your mom's house down the road or to your job, in 20 minutes. I mean, in LA, most of these individuals are spending 45 to an hour and a half commute times one way to get to their places of employment. So we have to continue to build robust systems of infrastructure, and that's every form. That's buses, it's transit, it's light rail, it's more roads across the valley, more arterial. So all of those ingredients will enable this place to continue to prosper.
Yeah. And I guess a closing question for you, Chris. Nearly 20 years in the market. You've been here at GPEC for 15. What do you hope that your legacy looks like here in Greater Phoenix? Well, we hope you never leave, by the way.
Whenever I hear legacy, I think that means we're almost
Time's
done.
up.
Yeah, we're almost done. Now, did you talk to the board and then know that the contract's up around the corner?
We've got some news for you, Chris. We're going to break it here on the podcast.
Yeah, it's weird you're handing me a pink slip here. So I don't really think even about that. I do think about when I talk to my kids about, having passion for the work you do, and putting yourself in a position to have a job that you truly care about, but also you can have an impact on your community. And I truly feel like that's what GPEC does and can do. And that's why you're both here. In addition to that, working with the mayors and supervisors in a cohesive regional approach that truly rising tide lifts all boats, which sounds soft, but at the same time, our job is to be ambitious. It's to dream for the market, and it's truly to set forth a new trajectory and expectation of this place that when people are here in 30 years from now, they say, wow, that group and that set of thinkers, not only were they dynamic in their thinking, but they could execute around those thoughts. And so, we're so fortunate to have people like Michael Crow and Brian Mueller and so many great thinkers that just push us every day. And we have mayors and city councilmen and women that just care so much about their communities that enable us to dream big and be ambitious. And again, the fruits of all this labor are what you see with these new companies coming to town, these new companies expanding, these founders accessing capital, these cities then being able to invest in the quality of life attributes and the parks and all these things that we build together. It wouldn't be without all of these individuals working together with such a level of passion. So that's what I hope one day is people look back and say, we cared, we were ambitious, we were driven for success, and we built a team that was just, of high quality that cared about each other as well. So that's all the prerequisites to a successful model, in my opinion.
Love it.
Love it. I have goosebumps a little bit. So, all right. Well, that wraps us up for the first episode. Listeners, thank you for joining us on the Greater Phoenix A to Z podcast. Tim and I will be back in a couple of weeks where I will be talking about Super Bowl 57. And Tim, what are you up to?
I will be talking about semiconductors and the Chips and Sciences Act, talking about semiconductor activity that is currently here in the region, and with some of this new federal money, what's going to be happening moving down the line. Exciting stuff.
Yeah. So until then, be sure to give GPEC a follow on this podcast. Leave a comment if you're so inclined, a positive comment only. And also be sure to give this podcast 5 stars. And you can also follow us on our social media platforms. We are on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So be sure to follow us on that to keep up to date on what we're up to. So until next time, I hope you are well and safe, and look forward to reconnecting soon.